And in Florida, bankers have introduced legislation that will streamline the foreclosure process and make Florida a non-judicial state. So because they're saying it takes too long to foreclose in Florida, we have to be able to do it faster. Can you imagine what happens to our neighborhoods if they win that? It's very, very alarming. And finally, I have a chart here. And this is what I was talking about, which is follow the money. Who benefits from the DocX fraud? So I took my DocX documents, my 1,740-some DocX documents, which are not only in binders in my living room, but also have been put onto discs and delivered to various law enforcement people, so there's no sense in burning my house down. I just want to add that. So I checked to see who the biggest beneficiaries were of the DocX mortgage assignments in Palm Beach County. The number one was Deutsche Bank. Number two, American Home Mortgage Servicing, which is the primary servicer for Deutsche Bank. Number three, our friends at Wells Fargo. 4, U.S. Bank. 5. So on and on it goes like that.
Courtrooms and
4A and 4B. Right now, most of these are being heard by Judge Hoy and Judge Lewis, and it's right in the courthouse on the other side of this.
And then Chief Judge is Peter Blong here, but if any of you are from or have contacts with activists in other areas of Florida, Sylvia's been one of our strongest proponents. She first heard me saying, go to court and observe about 2 years ago, and they wouldn't let her in.
Right.
I mean, they wouldn't even let her into foreclosure court. So courts are supposed to be open in America, and in Florida, we have it in our Florida Constitution that they're open. And we, about a year ago, got enough interest. The press was very interested in this issue, not so much because of the foreclosures, but because of freedom of speech and access to our courts. And the First Amendment Foundation got very involved, wrote a bunch of letters to the head of the Florida Supreme Court. The head of the Florida Supreme Court, Justice Kennedy, wrote to all of the courts and said, open them up, open the courts up, and still to this day, they are closed. And even if our activists court observers bring in that letter and show it to the bailiff and show it to the judge, they still don't.
We have thousands of documents where the supposed effective date is after the foreclosure was filed. We didn't acquire, that's in plain language, that's going in the court saying, we didn't acquire this mortgage until after we sued. But we want you to believe that we did that. We acquired it 2 months after we sued. And for the most part, the answer has been, okay, we believe that. Next case. Now, there's not any kind of recognition that that makes no sense whatsoever.
They're saying that $1 billion because of these MERS assignments and all that should have paid to the county coffers that didn't, that $1 billion is missing. I'm thinking that that money is one of the biggest things we should be going towards, because when the taxpayers realize that much money is missing to pay fire, police, etc., that I think you get more people recognizing how big a problem this is by focusing on that missing money.
Up until a few years ago, you always had to file a mortgage assignment, not a few, but you had to file a mortgage assignment. Before the days of something called MERS, which is the Mortgage Electronic Registration Systems, you had to file a mortgage assignment when you acquired a mortgage. Then the bankers came up with this wonderful new product called MERS, where they said we don't have to file anymore, and most states agreed with them and said you do not have to file a mortgage assignment. Because of that decision that you don't have to file a mortgage assignment, counties lost millions and millions of dollars in filing fee revenues. And that's what we're talking about. There are some places, like there are some states, Massachusetts and Texas, where you still had to file and they still didn't file. Florida, however, and North Carolina, South Carolina, there was no obligation to file a mortgage assignment. along with the Sign Your Own Damn Name Act, we need every time a trust acquires your mortgage, they have to file a mortgage assignment with the county saying they own it. So that you're not in the situation of thousands of homeowners that the first time you know that Deutsche Bank owns your home is when the sheriff comes and serves you with papers. I paid my mortgage payment to Option 1 Mortgage Company. I got my demand letter when I was behind from Option 1 Mortgage Company, and a month later when I was sued by Deutsche Bank National Trust Company. It was the first connection I had with that particular bank, and that story is true for tens of thousands of people across the country, and it's not just
Cars and noise early. What was that term she used? Forensic what?
Forensic auditor, forensic accountant, forensic auditor of the records, and our audits of that we are seeing with county record. Curtis Hertel of Michigan, another very active county recorder. The county recorder in Duval, Jim Fuller, Duval County, Florida, has sued MERS. So there are county recorders who are actively interested in correcting their county land records and collecting the money from the banks and fixing this situation. They are few and far between, but there sure are a lot more of them now than there were 2 years ago. And this will be a year where I think a lot of that turns around, because MERS has pretty much been exposed as just a tool used by bankers to foreclose.
Lynn, you mentioned about going to the courthouse as legal observers. Could you expand a little on the role of the Occupy movement in foreclosure resistance? What do you think occupiers can do to make a difference?
The main thing I've seen Occupy so far, besides explaining to the American people that the banks are our enemies, which is and have caused the collapse of the economy. You broke it, you fix it. Besides that, which I think is very important, between Christmas and January 15th, we had 4 different families, Hawaii, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida, who would have been evicted, who would have been foreclosed upon, and would have been out on the street, but for the fact that the day that was supposed to happen, their property was surrounded by the occupiers. And the occupiers pretty much said, hell no, you're not taking this house. And lovely family. And as a result of the press, we did stories about how bad the documents were, about how the bank had been absolutely ruthless and wouldn't talk to them and wouldn't negotiate with them, or had, in the case of the Hawaiian family, outright lied to them. If you sign this modification, we won't foreclose, and then we will foreclose. All 4 families are still in their home. That never would have happened without Occupy. That's the only reason they're still in their home, because we've been writing about this and doing things and wringing our hands for 2 years and nothing has happened.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on that, because on Dimitri's question, because I've been listening to all of these, trying to get my head around the systemic, the different dimensions of this very large systemic problem. And my question is to extend what Dimitri's question, that is, and here's some of the places where we could intervene. This whole thing, you mentioned like a tour of the neighborhood where every 6th home is in foreclosure, and the whole neighborhood is going down the tubes.
And you can look up by address who owns that house.
You mentioned the top beneficiaries in Palm Beach County: Deutsche Bank, American Home Services, Wells Fargo. Lisa mentioned that Palm Beach County is depositing its money in Wells Fargo. Okay, these are possible places of intervention.
Right. Observing in the court, the Mothers Against Drunk Driving was incredibly effective by getting women whose children were harmed by drunk drivers to wear t-shirts or shirts that signify who they are, and then to go into court trials and hold the judge's attention as we are mothers of the community. And the same thing can be done here with foreclosure fraud or whatever, to let the judges know that we're watching. Another great place that calls for activism is our 4th DCA. I don't know if anyone's heard me talk about our 4th District Court of Appeals right here on Palm Beach Lakes. So they take the appellate cases from Broward and Palm Beach and a couple other counties. There have been many, many decisions that are pro-bank, that says the banks did the right thing by kicking that family out. Why are you bringing this case to us? But there have been 4 cases that were decided where the appellate judges said, you know, maybe the banks weren't right in this case. Go back to the lower court and let's litigate this. In all 4 of the cases, the bank lawyers went to the judges and wrote a motion for clarification or a motion for rehearing. 2 of those have already been totally flipped to allow for the banks to prevail, and 2 more, the judges just haven't come up with a decision yet. So I've tried, there's another person here, I've had protests in front of the 4th District Court of Appeals, but there have been only 3 people I can get to attend: myself, another activist, and my 4-year-old daughter. So it would be nice to get some people to do that, because when I'm holding up a sign saying your decisions are harming hundreds of thousands of Floridians in your community and there's 3 of us, you lose credibility.
Just tell us when. Ready? Yeah.